General Umaru Mohammed to 7 years imprisonment. He was found guilty of 14 out of 18 count charges brought against him. The court also ordered that the convicted senior officer should refund $2.17 million and 1.06 billion naira, the amount of monies he was said to have stolen, back to the coffers of the company. Now, having defended several officers and court-martial, let's have a fair idea of how this happened from Mr. Femi Falana, who is the senior advocate of Nigeria, joins us here in the studio. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Let me first of all get your initial reaction to this particular case.
Well, I had followed the case, and I was quite pleased with the turnout of events. I mean, the conclusion, the judgment, I think, is very sound, and it's going to be difficult, you know, quite difficult to set it aside. Because it wasn't really denied that these offenses took place. I think at a stage what the general did say, the defendant, was that he wasn't acting alone. And I do hope that aspect of his defense will be, you know, considered and followed up by the authorities. He indicted a particular former chief of army staff, and that most of the times he was taking instructions from him. So that cannot be swept under the carpet. But in terms of the quality of the judgment, I want to believe that General Court Martial did very well.
So when you say it will be difficult to be set aside, are you anticipating an appeal of sorts?
Oh, for sure. I mean, at that level, it's likely to file an appeal. It's likely to have an appeal at the Court of Appeal and up to the Supreme Court.
Because, you know, I mean, the question I was going to ask was whether or not that was final.
No, it's not final.
That's the military, you know.
It's a military court. You either have the General Court Martial or the Special Court Martial. Okay. And after they have delivered their judgment, the convicts or convicted army officer, a soldier, has the right under the Constitution to approach the Court of Appeal. And if he's not satisfied with the decision of the Court of Appeal, he also will have to go to the Supreme Court.
Mr. Falana, a number of people will be wondering how frequently such things happen, particularly in the army.
Well, it happens from time to time. Serving military officers who violate or contravene the provisions of the Armed Forces Act are usually charged. They are investigated, and if indicted, they are arraigned. It is because of the nature of this case that has attracted public attention. You know, when you talk about corruption or criminal diversion of public funds, people, you know, wonder, you know, where this is coming from. And now that the question of the war against corruption, you know, hasn't quite taken shape under this regime. So people are wondering what is going on, you know. But the other one, I think for me, what has happened is a lesson for our courts, our lawyers and judges. When you are charged before a military court, the lawyers and the defendants are not allowed to engage in dilatory tactics. For instance, no bail, no application for bail, no interlocutory appeals or stay of proceedings, you know. So once the panel is constituted, it's almost day by day. To have an adjournment, the reason must be very, very strong and convincing, you know. So for me, I think it's a very good development that you have this type of a judicial system that works. You know, vis-a-vis the civil court that have been hijacked by the rich and their lawyers. when it comes to trial for corruption, money laundering, and related offenses.
You know, I was thinking that such a case should have actually, I don't know, gone to the you know, as you said, the corruption, anti-corruption agencies such as the EFCC, being a financial crime.
I've always advised against that, personally, because once you are subject to service law, right, all offenses committed that can be located within the ambit of the law will have to be tried by a military court. You have to be investigated by the military police and not by the EFCC. When they do that, including those who were indicted for engaging in criminal diversion of huge sums of money earmarked for arms procurement, I was opposed to their trial before regular courts, because these are war crimes. Even if you have retired, once you commit a war-related crime, mutiny or desertion, you can be brought back and tried. But once, I think it's a matter of class interest. I think the idea of sending them to the EFCC and the ICPC has to do with class solidarity. You know, we don't want these people convicted by our own courts. We want them in the regular courts, where the rich have hijacked the system. And that's what is going on. Well, but I hope this will lead to a review of you know, the trial of indicted military officers.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about, you know, the fact that it's a special court and consequently it should get its fair share of its specialty. But it's also interesting that the court-martial was supposed to involve about 14 officers and 9 soldiers. How come it's only just one person that we seem to be hearing more of at this time? Also, in your response, add to the fact that, you know, you said one person was also indicted. So what happens in that case?
I'm convinced that all those who have been indicted will be tried. I mean, that is the nature of military law. All those who are indicted, but there is a powerful, you know, former service chief whose case will have to be taken up by the society. Because some of these guys are more powerful than, you know, the system. So I expect the anti-graft, private anti-graft bodies to also insist that justice be done fully, without any...
I'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah. But how about the other people that were court-martialed along with this general?
I guess their own cases might still be going on.
Okay. But to the issue that you mentioned the other time, you said earlier in your response that when a soldier, even if the person has retired, the person can be brought back to court-martial.
Yeah, depending on the nature of the case.
Depending on the nature of the case. Yeah. But if this man, as you said, the general has indicted, you know, a retired fellow, so how come that person will not be taken to a regular court as opposed to a court-martial?
No, it depends, because within if the retired general left within 3 years, it can be brought back. Okay. But apparently, from the nature of the charges, it has nothing to do with mutiny or a war crime. So it will have to be tried in a regular court.
Okay. Now, to the issue of the EFCC that we talked about the other time, of course, you are not unaware that a new head has since gone in there, and a number of issues are coming up on that one. But I want to still go back to the issue, first of all, of being indicted and being the cases going through the EFCC, which is an anti-corruption agency, being a financial crime. Do you see a situation where these indicted officers that you talked about could be investigated by the EFCC or their cases transferred to the EFCC?
No. I think there was a problem. There was a mistake. In exercise of his powers under the Recovery of Public Property Act, the former president, General Muhammadu Buhari, set up a presidential panel on arms procurement. And I think the report, the panel concluded that about $2.1 billion was stolen by certain officers. The president then sent the report to the efcc, which for me was very wrong. He should have gone to the military police, because the money alleged to have been stolen was meant for procurement of arms to prosecute, the war against terrorism. So those officers who were indicted can really be accused of impeding the war, or, of engaging mutiny, frustrating the war against terrorism, which had led to killing of thousands of people and destruction of public property. So the government was wrong to have sent the report to the efcc. In fact, there was even an incident, I think about 4 years ago, where I think after the 2019 elections, where some soldiers, 2014 and 2015 and 2019, where army officers and soldiers were alleged to have participated in the rigging of elections. And I think the chief of army staff said, we're going to send a report to the EFCC. What has the EFCC got to do with that? It is your duty to try them. But what the authorities did in the military was to retire those who were indicted. That's not enough, because you must bring them to book under the Armed Forces Act, because they committed offenses.
The question really is, for clarity, yes, Mr. Falana, we're in a democracy.
Yes.
We're in a civil rule now.
Yes, yes.
And these fellows committed these crimes,
yes,
as you have said.
Yes.
So a good number of people will be wondering, if we're in a civil rule, why use a military court?
No, we have the Armed Forces Act, and all over the world, under democratic government, you have military courts. And in order to ensure that nobody complains of having suffered injustice, once the military panels or the military courts have taken their decisions, you have the right to appeal to normal civilian courts of appeal. What we are doing now at the level of the Commonwealth, experts have been assembled, I think, in the first week of November, to look at the military laws in each of the Commonwealth member states, to see how we can ensure that the tribunals are properly constituted, I think the military courts, and that, in fact, they are headed by civilian judges, so there will be full independence and impartiality, So some of these developments are being considered, okay, in line with democratic practice.
Okay, but you also said the other time that, you tend to praise the judgment of this military court,
yes,
and you said it's a lesson,
yes,
for civilian courts.
Yes.
Now, are you saying by any chance that this military court has been more detailed and more effective than the regular courts?
The point I'm making is that, unlike regular courts, you cannot hijack the military court. What I mean is this. Since 2015, this country has ensured that criminal trials are speedily conducted, that you can't have adjournments of more than 7 days, and that you cannot stay proceedings of the courts. But what has happened? Yes, for a few months, when the law first came out, everybody was happy. We can make progress now. But now, the law is now as dead as dodo. We are back to square one. People walk, accused persons go to court to ask for permission to travel abroad and conduct their businesses. Granting bail is automatic, no matter the gravity of the offense or the amount involved. It's only the poor whose cases are speedily conducted in the magistrate and area courts. But for those who can hire the services of highly placed lawyers, you walk to the court leisurely to subject your case to unending adjournments. And because the courts are busy, you get away with it. So, and that is why, I know cases filed by the ICPC in the year 2001. I know cases filed by the efcc in 2007 that are still pending in our courts. It shouldn't be so.
You said these don't happen in... No.
No. You know, it's, like I said, it's day by day. For you to, because they have assembled the judges from different military formations, they have to go back to their beats, you know. So you cannot go there and be asking for adjournment on flimsy grounds. Unless, for instance, the general who has just been jailed said he was indisposed, you know. He was brought in a wheelchair. The authorities, you know, try to confirm, you know, whether truly he was sick. And they said he was fit to stand trial. And of course, but in the regular courts, you know, the man, if you're a big man or a big woman, you even say you want to go abroad for treatment, and you'll be so allowed, you know. It's only the poor that do not have such
isn't that also
opportunities.
Isn't that what human rights lawyers also say?
No, that's not human rights. That's abuse of human rights. Because the law must be evenly applied in the country. And that is why the lady of justice is blindfolded. That means she sees nobody and she's ready to dispense justice without fear or favor. But that lady of justice has been raped in capitalist countries. In fact, kidnapped. You know. That's what goes on in a capitalist society. Okay,
now let's quickly talk about the EFCC. You've talked about the EFCC quite a few times. You know there's a new sheriff in town in EFCC now. And a good number of, some people are wondering whether or not, you know, the proper process or procedure has been followed in the engagement of the EFCC chairman. Do you think there is any issue there?
No, there's no issue. The only issue that has been raised, which for me, has to be considered by the government, is that you have in this country the Federal Character Commission Act, and also by virtue of Section 14 of the Constitution, appointments must reflect federal character. So if you are going to have, you have the EFCC and the ICPC, the heads cannot come from the same zone. So if there are two positions in this country, in the public service, one must go to the north, one must come to the south. If there are 4, 2 must go to the north, 2 must come to the south. If there are 6, 1 must go to each geopolitical zone. That is the law in Nigeria today. So I am not comfortable with the fact as of today, the heads of the EFCC and the ICPC are from the same zone. Apart from that, Mr. Olukoyede is eminently qualified to head the EFCC. My colleagues who have criticized the appointment have not looked at the laws, the relevant law, the relevant provision of the EFCC, which is Section 2, which provides that the chairman, right, must be at least an assistant commissioner of police or its equivalent in the security service or in a law enforcement agency. When Mr. Abdurrashid Bawa was appointed, there were people saying, no, this position is for police officers. And I said, no. If you had served in a law enforcement agency, you are qualified and you have acquired enough experience, you are qualified to head the EFCC. In the case of Mr. Olukoyede, he the chief of staff to the chairman of the efcc. He has also been the secretary of that body, and of course a board member by virtue of his position as a secretary of the commission. Now, people are saying, oh, he hasn't acquired the cognate experience. The law does not say the cognate experience must be in that agency. So if you have a gentleman who is said to be a regulatory compliance consultant and who has also worked in the detection of crime or fraud, accomplished, expert in those areas, you cannot say he hasn't acquired the cognate experience. Because cognate experience actually means your acquisition of the skills in the area we're talking about. So it does not mean it shall be in the efcc. For instance, I know a lawyer who has been prosecuting for the efcc since 2004 when the body took off. And I'm talking of more than any lawyer in Nigeria. He has successfully prosecuted corruption cases, financial crimes cases. I'm talking of Mr. Rotimi Jacobs SAN. So there's no way you can say that such a lawyer who has prosecuted majority of the cases investigated by the FCC has not acquired the cognate experience. So if you have a lawyer of 22 years who has spent the better part of his practice in detection of crimes, detection of fraud-related crimes, and who has acquired the knowledge at home and abroad, who has worked with international anti-fraud agencies like FBI, the fraud office in the UK and the rest of them, it is difficult to say, to question his competence. Again, as I said, the only area where I think the government will have to go back to the drawing table is also to ensure that the anti-graft agencies in the country are not headed by people from one region.
Okay. Chamberlain.
Yeah, morning, Mr. Falana. So, about this case of this Major General that has been sentenced, there's been lots of concerns and questions, especially when you now know that, look, we've channeled and still keep complaining that the military doesn't have enough funds to prosecute the war against terrorism. We had a former Minister of Sport here, Mr. Dalon, who also spoke about corruption during his time and the government at the time, how they needed to do a lot more than they had done. And then we get to hear this case. I mean, anti-corruption agencies, including rights activists, lawyers like yourself, have lent their voices to ensure that things go right. So with this case that has come up now, what needs to change in the way we fight corruption such that it is institutionalized, as many will have been calling, in order for us to have a proper direction, because many don't think we're making a headway in our fight against corruption?
Well, in the first place, it has to be realized that the governments, generally, not just in Nigeria, governments do not fight corruption. It is the duty of the people, particularly victims of corruption, assisted or led by civil society organizations like the trade unions, civil rights movements, to expose corruption. And in the case of Nigeria, we must take advantage of the provisions of the law to write petitions, to follow up those petitions and ensure that they are fully investigated. And anybody who is indicted will have to be brought to book. As I did say earlier, because of class solidarity on the part of the government and those who are indicted for corruption, it's difficult for the government to muster the political will to fight corruption. Therefore, it It is the duty of Nigerian people to expose corruption. The media used to fight corruption in Nigeria. Before the birth of the efcc and ICPC and the rest of them, it was the duty of the media in Nigeria to fight corruption. In the days of Yutakami Aidaboyu, I'm not sure, Chamberlain, you know, you guys will know what I'm talking about. But in the 70s, all you needed to do, if you knew that a public officer was corrupt, you simply would go to a court, file an affidavit that this guy collected so much money, or he had awarded this contract to his friend or a family member, therefore he has committed corruption. From that moment, the press will pick it up and feast on it until the officer was forced to resign, or the officer decided on his own to quit the government. But these days, you know, the press, the media, you know, cannot be relied upon when it comes to exposing corruption. Maybe apart from today, maybe apart from Sahara reporters, you hardly find stories about corruption in other print and electronic media. So that area will have to be addressed. Secondly, we have to appreciate that corruption is an integral part of a capitalist system. And when you are running a peripheral capitalist system like our own, it's almost normal. It's almost normal to have corruption at this dangerous level. Therefore, it is no longer enough for Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress to talk about removal of fuel subsidy, or, you know, fight for minimum wage or better conditions of service. If the bulk of the money meant for development is stolen, there's no way you can have improved conditions of service. And that is why it has to be a battle for all Nigerians to fight this dangerous economic system that we're operating. And of course, corruption, that is part of it. But there's no way we can go on like this. And Nigerians have to realize that corruption is a manifestation of impunity. Because you have the Appropriation Law, Appropriation Act. Once somebody has stolen money budgeted for building a hospital or constructing roads, they has committed a violation of the Appropriation Act or the Appropriation Law of a state. Today, apart from Kano State, there is no state in Nigeria that is fighting corruption. It's only Kano State that has an anti-graft agency.
Well, the thing is, Mr. Falana, I mean, the media, the way they report and investigate corruption and report it will definitely differ in terms of print and electronic, where one requires visuals for people to speak about certain things. But we hear you on that particular matter. But now, particularly for security agencies, what should change? Because now, you know, usually they'll say, look, when it has to do with budgets for security, there's little or no questions that can be asked, because they tell you, look, this is highly classified, these are security concerns. In fact, they have security votes in many cases, and they don't want to speak up about what should be done about that. Now that this kind of corruption cases are coming up in the security circle, should we have a second look at what happens to security votes and the way they answer questions about it?
Well, with profound respect, there's no provision for security votes under the law. The Section 217 of the Constitution, you know, provides that the armed forces shall be adequately funded, while Section 215 of the Constitution has created the Nigerian Police Force, and there shall be no other force, you know, to compete with the Nigerian Police Force. So if the security agencies in our country are funded, or the money meant to fund them to acquire arms and ammunition and to improve the conditions of life of the officers or the members of the armed forces or the police force is stolen or diverted, the society must be interested, because it's akin to crimes against humanity to steal money meant for counter-insurgency operations. And that is why we must be interested in security votes. What you call security votes at the federal and state level are a legacy of a corrupt military regime, the Babangida junta. We never knew anything about, security vote. Today, I think the last study, done by Transparency International, about 241 billion naira goes for security votes in the country. Any public fund must be accounted for. So if you say, oh, the police cannot cope with maintaining security in my state, therefore we need 2 billion every month for security, then you must account for it in the parliament. That is what the Constitution has provided for. So we must be interested in monitoring, in tracking public funds, so that we can have development in our country. Right now, the government is taking loans to pay salaries, to fund projects, because the economy is totally mismanaged. Totally. And we must go beyond simply fighting corruption. How do you erect a system that will reduce corruption to the barest minimum? How do you collect money owed the country by foreign, agencies, multinational corporations, and departments of the government? For me, it's not about chasing one or two people or what the efcc does now. You reel out figures of number of people convicted, and at the end of the day, these are, internet fraudsters, young people who engage in what you call Yahoo operations. Whereas those who cause them to engage in such criminality are moving freely in town. We know them. So why will a young man engage in Yahoo operations if he or she is gainfully engaged? So these are the areas we have to look at. Why is our country poor? Why are we taking loans? Why don't we collect the money owed the country by NNPC, by oil companies to the tune of over $100 billion? I was amazed yesterday when I read that, the government is going again to take a loan of $1.5 billion. I said, I beg your pardon. When the money...
Mr. Falana, again, if I may come in, I am just to also emphasize that we hear you when you say that there needs to be so much more exposure of corruption on the part of the media. But let me ask you this.
No.
On those that have been exposed...
I didn't say corruption on the part of the media.
By the investigations done by the National Assembly, are you satisfied? Because one of the things that people have been asking is, what exactly have come out of those investigations? Even where we all have seen that there was corruption in this particular process or in this institution, nothing seems to have been done. What are the people supposed to do about that?
Maokwe, I didn't say there is corruption in the media. I don't make general statements, because you can accuse me of a fallacy of generalization if I say there is corruption in the media, But what I'm saying is that the media no longer, fight corruption as it used to do. But having said that, again, it's our duty to follow up on public hearing by the National Assembly. Just last week, I sent a letter to the Finance Committee of the Senate, because last year, 2 years ago, that body had conducted a public hearing where it was revealed that for the past 20 years, the money destined for the Federation account by way of dividends and feed gas and taxes paid by the LNG in Rivers State total about $32 billion. Again, in the last couple of years, additional $1.5 billion has been added. And I'm writing to I've written to the Senate committee, please, can we have a copy of your report? under the Freedom of Information Act, because that's about $33.7 billion. If within 7 days I do not get a reply, I will go to court to ask the court to compel the committee to give me a copy. So we must take advantage of the provisions of the law. I mean, Mr. Emefiele, the former governor of the central bank, told the whole world that we have printed enough money, we have given enough money to the banks, and people didn't have the money. People attacked the banks. Some banks' buildings were set on fire. Some people were killed. Some died collapsed while queuing up, for money. And I had to write to the central bank, please, under the Freedom of Information Act, can I know how much was printed? To my utter dismay, whereas the central bank collected about 3.2 trillion, mop up about 3.2 trillion from customers and others, the bank only printed 402 billion naira. So we must take advantage of the law and use the law to expose corruption and get information to defend our people.
Well, Mr. Falana, we're almost out of time, and I think it's very important to say I didn't say that you said there was corruption in the media. I only said that we heard you when you said that the media needs to do more to expose corruption.
Thank you.
But just quickly, talking about the law now, you've also intervened on the EFCC chairman matter. But I'm looking at Section 2 right now, which talks about being a serving or retired member of any government, security, or law enforcement agency not below the rank of an assistant commissioner of police or equivalent, and possess not less than 15 years cognate experience. Yes. Are you saying that and ought to be ignored in the appointment of an EFCC
I am saying
chairman?
that the cognate experience does not mean in the EFCC or in the police force or in a law enforcement agency. If you look at the meaning of the word cognate experience actually means acquiring enough skills or experience in a related organization. So if somebody has been a private lawyer and has devoted for 22 years and has devoted a substantial part of his practice to detecting fraud, and so on and so forth, you cannot say that it's not qualified under and cognate experience. That's the point I'm making.
No, Mr. Falana, the question is, I mean, the problem is that the new EFCC appointed chairman is not a member of any security agency. That's the quarrel.
He had worked in the EFCC as secretary and a member of the board, so he's talking of law enforcement agency. Look at it very well. Not only security agency. Security agency or law enforcement agency. Yeah. And in the case of Bauer, when this argument was raised, I said, no, the law is talking of law enforcement agency, and the EFCC is a law enforcement agency. So you can't say, because Bauer was not in the police force, therefore he was not qualified to be appointed the chairman of the EFCC.
So many other issues we would have loved to take you up on, Mr. Falana, but we're completely out of time right now. We have to thank you so much for the perspective.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Mr. Femi Falana is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you again for being here. So some of your own contribution to this program this morning. First is from Austin Obey, who is talking about the CBN Forex review. He writes, if the government continues with inconsistent policies like the latest CBN Forex update, will only trigger shocks to the manufacturing sector. For over 20 years now, there's been a mass exodus of FDI multinationals in Nigeria. The latest is GSK. The government must focus on power, energy, and infrastructure. Manufacturers can then invest more in their core business rather than buying generators, water treatment plants, construction of roads, and equally provide security for their operations. All these will result into increase in productivity and new jobs created.
Paul Agbolade is talking about access to official FX. He says we need to outrightly ban the importation of those products we can locally produce. Otherwise, Nigerians' high taste for imported products will never allow local production to thrive. On the issue of competitiveness, our regulatory agencies such as SON, NAFDAC, Consumer Protection Agency, and Price Regulatory Agency should wake up to their organizational mission and vision. Without adequate manufacturing, every infrastructural development, including power generation, will be underutilized in the long run.
Oshinawa Kingsley says Nigeria can never get out of the shackles of underdevelopment if we rely on the importation of products that we are endowed with, the primary raw materials. We strain our forex, import inflation, expand unemployment, and kill domestic industries. Pastor Law Alpha, you say the army as a security outfit seems to be operating in a space which it is determining, and as a result, it may be difficult to discover if there is financial corruption in its ranks. But I also like to just let these ones out there. I know we don't have it, but they sent it in to let Mr. Falana know that Oyo State had anti-corruption agency. It's headed by Honorable Justice Eni Esson, retired, and the agency is very proactive. And then it says, with respect to Mr. Falana, he didn't answer the doctrine of compact. It says the doctrine of compact simply means that the Nigerian military personnel becomes subject not only to military law, but he also remains bound by the ordinary civil and criminal law of the country. All right, so there you go. Those are some feedback that came through from those of you who watch. We appreciate your thoughts and comments. Please keep them coming because we will be back here again tomorrow. Thank you for watching. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Thank you. It's good to be back again.
Welcome back, Maokwe. Well, interestingly, Mr. Falana also mentioned that the soldiers are indeed subject not only to their own court-martial and all, but to the Constitution of Nigeria and the courts in the country. Thank you and have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.